So I was looking at this picture, and this photo which is just behind, and I was kind of confused that what this picture is trying to convey. Is it the pre-Amrit Kaal to post-Amrit Kaal, reality versus aspiration? What does it trying to convey? So then it occurred to me, it's basically the lens. I mean, I can apply any lens and I can interpret this picture in any which way. So same thing is applicable to agriculture, which is an extremely layered, extremely complex metrics, multiple layers. And if coming to the topic that has been entrusted to me to speak on is market and marketplaces in Amrit Kaal. So it's like a typical conundrum of cart or horse. I mean, this market and marketplace is more like a cart, and the horse is what needs the first address, and the cart will automatically follow if there is a horse around. So, I mean, there are multiple things that have been happening over the last 60, 70 years, and it's continuing to happen every year. So, the key changes or the key patterns that are emerging across the multiple discussion spectrums or thought spectrums is I've enumerated here. So, subsistence to commerce. I mean, a large portion of India agriculture is subsistence, and some places it's trying to become commerce. Then the focus of the entire agriculture policy, whether it is the producer, it is the citizen, or it is the consumer. So the government as well as the public policy makers as well as the civil society is trying to create their camps by some people are trying to focus on producers, some people are trying to focus on consumer, but there is also a big discussion to focus on citizen, which is basically does not have the exact discretion, but he deserves to have the security of his food as well as nutrition as his rights as a citizen. Then the productivity management. I mean, this is a very interesting thing that I learned in my career with the cotton industry is that what have we trying to achieve, whether we have been trying to achieve the deficit management or we have been trying to achieve the surplus management. I'll give you one very interesting, I'll share a very interesting anecdote. It's a personally experienced one on cotton because a good part of my career has been in cotton trading. So as my sir has mentioned about the BT seed, and I've been in cotton industry since 1996. So when I joined the industry, the production of cotton in India was around 12 to 13 million bales or 14 million bales. And India's consumption was around 17, 18 million bales. And India was importing close to around 30, 40 million bales every year because it was it had access in the multi-fiber agreement quota, which needed to be supplied to, and the cotton was getting imported. Then the BT happened in 2004-05, and the production went up from 13 million bales to close to around, at the peak, around 38, 39 million bales as the peak we touched. I mean, we moved from sub 300 kgs productivity to around 545 kg per hectare productivity of cotton. What it did in monetary terms between 2005 and 2016-17, when we hit the peak, the total cumulative $1 billion that the entire ecosystem comprising of farmers, spinners, ginners, textile merchandise producers, exporters was close to around $286 billion. That's the value that India generated only by one seed. Then what happened? That it went into a tussle between one seed producer and the technology patent owner, and then it reached the Delhi High Court double bench, which said that the patenting rights are not available, and the curtain was down on the BT seed. The next generation did not come, and we are back from 544 to around 405, 410 kgs. I'm not saying entire responsibility of the BT not being available. There could be multiple reasons, but it is one of the key reasons if we try to it. Why did it happen? Because Indian Seed Act did not have a patenting protection for IPR, for anybody who's investing such huge amount of money and trying to recover. Now, how much money that company was trying to make, and I'm not advocating that, I'm just putting the numbers for you to judge. The number of packets that are being sold in India for cotton is around 4 crore, roughly, give and take a few million here and there. And what they were asking were, I think, around 150 rupees per packet high. So how much that could have been? 600 crore rupees per year extra. 600 crore rupees in dollar terms would be what? Around $100 million, less than $100 million. So a seed which generated $280 billion over a period of 13 years, our system did not afford him less than $100 billion a year. That's the point I'm trying to make. So when we choose very, very narrow issues against the larger things, we end up facing the issue of deficit management versus surplus. So there was a delegation I was part of which was representing our case as a part of textile, that you please give us this third generation seed, because we did a calculation, a simulation, that if the BT3 comes and India's productivity goes back to again from 400 to 650 or 700 as it is evidenced in many cotton growing countries, the next 8 years or 9 years, India will generate close to $1.3 trillion of value across the value chain. And how much money that somebody will pocket? Again, loose change, $100 billion and thereabout. So the response that we got from in that forum, which was addressed to the government policymakers, that what will happen if I give you the seed? That was a question posed to the delegation. I said, we'll be producing maybe 50 million bales. He said, if I give you the seed, you guys produce 50 million bales, you will bring back 40 million bales back to me to buy at MSP. That was the response. So he said, if I am the buyer of the last resort, why should I give you a seed which will create problem for me? So the issue here is of a mindset that we cannot manage both the things simultaneously, deficit as well as surplus, because it has implications on both the sides. Then the another discussion that keeps happening is that whether it is food security or it is nutrition security or it is a fair and equitable enterprise for the producer. Because these are the questions which will keep on getting challenged on both the sides, and I don't know whether we will have solutions or not for a equitable marketplace for this produce. I'll just give you a very simple number. I mean, it can throw up many questions. This is a comparable template of India versus China. I mean, if you see, the land holding of China is even worse than India. So the numbers are the sequence in this. 430 billion is what India produced on 198 million hectares of gross crop, on 141 million hectares of net sown area. It produces $2,170 per hectare, and it is done by 147 million farmer households. That's the category of these numbers. If you look at China, $1.37 trillion on 166 million gross crop area, on 108 net sown area, $8,250 per hectare, and done by 200 million farmers. So their landholding is much less than us, but their productivity is 4 times. So the point is that India's landholding is comparable to China, but they did something: technology, integration, aggregation, IoT, policy, whatever. They produce a solution. So it's not that India cannot do it. So this is a kind of, in the numbers, I'll not go into the number, I just would like to highlight one clear thing, is that when we talk about 17% of the GDP comes from agriculture, but look at the gross fixed capital formation as a percentage of GDP is hardly any. It's what we are doing close to around 2.4% of gross fixed capital as a percentage of GVA, 2.4. So how can economic component, which is 17% of GDP, can grow when the GCF share is only 2.4%? It's impossible. It will keep on losing its productive ability if there is no correspondence in the GCF and its share in the economy. So the rest of the numbers are known to everybody, and I'm not pointing that. So this is how I look at Indian agriculture when we look at the market. It's essentially a tripartite agreement between God, government, and farmer. That's how I look at it. And any one of the leg of this tripartite agreement fails, the farmer suffers. And then it sets a whole chain reaction. So, though it's largest employer, 50% population, we have all been looking at these numbers for last 7 decades, nothing new. But the whole idea what I'm putting here is that it requires huge investments to give justice to this 50% population, which is simply, so no country can ever become rich if 50% population is producing 17% economy. It will never change. It will remain like this. So, though we are trying to move from shortage management to surplus management, and from self-sufficiency to food security, and finally to the nutrition security, that's the kind of graduation that everybody aspires. But how and when it will happen, I think the question is open in the air. If you look at, so one very interesting observation I kind of made for myself, that the commodities which are most influenced by government action, there the CAGR of 15, 16, 17 years is around 2% plus. And the commodities where there is no government intervention, there the productivity change in CAGR terms is 4%. So basically where government did not touch anything, the productivity grew double of where they touched. So, I mean, that throws up a question that whether intervention is necessary or it is counterproductive. So coming to the success, I mean, it's not that everything is bad. There have been so many success stories in last 7 decades. And what I see, the common pattern in all success stories, that essentially it's a triangulation of 3 components, which is both productivity, aggregation and distribution. The first successful test case was Green Revolution, when productivity increased through the entire technological intervention. The FCI was formed for aggregation and PDS was enabled for distribution. Same model we saw in Operation White Revolution, Operation Flood, where the production happened through the intervention in animal husbandry in Gujarat and many states. Unions happened to collect it, and the federation happened for distributing it. So basically a triad worked. Same thing we saw in edible oil also, when there was the Operation Golden Flow intervention. And same thing that we have seen in from 1991 2003 is Operation the Golden Revolution in horticulture. There also we have seen that a full support was to production, aggregation, distribution, but this time it was left to market. And finally, that's why we have seen this such a wonderful 2x of the row crops productivity. So, I mean, I'll not go much into detail because it has been belabored upon in all presentation that there are significant issues and challenges. So, basically the fragmented, I mean, everybody knows this number by heart because people are spent. If you look at the number 14.1, I mean 141 billion hectare land with 147 million farmers registered. But out of that 147 million farmers, only 76 million farmers own close to 30% of this 140 million. So that leaves around 96 million, 97 million hectares of land for the remaining 137 million or 138 million farmers. So essentially the land holding is even worse than if we divide the aggregates by aggregates. If we remove the 30% holding by 5% guys, the remaining 95% is with the remaining 95% people own 70%. So the land holding becomes even worse. I don't know what solution is there for that. Monsoon, okay, that's another issue, that India is not a consumer processed food. So it's a cultural issue and it cannot change overnight. So coming to the lack of processing, because there's an internal issue of not consuming process, our trade participation has also remained very lackluster. The whatever we are doing in terms of trade, it is mostly unprocessed or raw commodities and not much of the value-added or processed one. I mean, if you look at the numbers, ASEAN countries, the agriculture commodity that gets traded from ASEAN bloc, more than 85% commodities are in value-added form, because they've taken their agriculture value chain to a level where they've been able to homogenize, standardize, same kind of agriculture background, but yet they have achieved an enormous percentage of their agriculture produced in a value-added form, and they are a force to reckon with in the global agriculture trade. But here we are still operating at a absolutely no value-added raw commodity category, which will never fetch the value either for the farmer or the people who are working for it. What has happened is that because of the low investment and the low poor returns on even in the value added, so the economics, because a lot of the issues in agriculture processing has been influenced by political angle also. So what has resulted because of that we have got huge surplus capacity. It has destroyed the profitability of the sector. So the serious money has stopped coming into agriculture processing. I mean, we can mention about a few consumer-centric things, but not on a large scale in the processing sector, and thereby approaching the global markets in a process form. Now, as Dr. Mai has mentioned, everybody talk about productivity, but if productivity really catches up only to the global averages, forget about the global best, this is the amount of surplus India will generate. I mean, look at, this is a comparison I have taken, that if R&D actually succeeds, are we ready to address that surplus? If India actually, as Dr. Mai has said, that we have achieved the global parity in many commodities in horticulture, but not as much in the row crops. So if India ever achieves, what it will do? So this is the surplus it will generate, and if I put in the trading terms, as my topic is market and marketplace, it throws up a scary picture. We will be able to capture almost 100% of the global trade by just being at global average of productivity in most of the crops. And if by any luck or God's favor, if we achieve the global best in productivity, I mean the global best in cotton is 2500 kgs in Australia, as against our 400 kg. If by any chance we reach there, we will actually wallop the entire global trade maybe a few times over. So the whole point here is that if the technology and a policy and the willingness and the civil society and everything come together, then the solution, I mean the value that India can generate is beyond imagination, and in that sense that it will start influencing the geopolitical. I mean, just to give an example, despite China having $1.37 trillion production, it still has a $95 billion of agriculture import, and India has a trade deficit with China close to around 90 billion. So if India achieves even the global averages, it will help bridging or addressing a situation of both trade deficit and a maybe trust deficit with China. Both the things can be addressed only using agriculture. Impact of investments on agriculture ecosystem. So the point I am saying that when we talk about market and marketplace, it's not merely the left to the market devices. It can be used as a strategic tool or as a geopolitical tool, because China imports close to 99 million ton of soybean, 7 million ton of corn, and 4 million ton of sugar. And all these things, just by being at global average, India can supply at competitive prices to China and can address multiple issues together. Growth drivers, I'll not go into this because everybody has covered in multiple things. I'll simply leave it to you to read. So aggregation, R&D, leveraging technology, enhancing export competitiveness. These are all oft repeated things. I don't think any further repetition will add any value to today's discussion. The whole idea is that I'll again go back to one point which I've left out, that India's economic reforms happened in 1991, and if you look at the numbers on the the macro GDP, the only sector that was left out in 1991 was agriculture in terms of reform. Every other sector got benefited in 91 reforms, but agriculture was not touched. The biggest beneficiary of the 91 reforms was the IT. And one of the key factors that IT grew from nowhere to $350 billion of export, because for 10 years it was enjoying income tax free status. Now, when India has only two things in abundant surplus. One is the labor, which requires some sort of utilization, service export or whatever form. And the second is a productive land, which can easily create more than $300 billion or $400 billion surpluses, just by looking at some of those macroeconomic enablers that was provided to various sectors of economy in 1991. So I think time has come that if the policymakers look at this 147 million hectares as a one national resource and create like as if it is owned by one single command and do something. Rankumarji is here. I think he must have faced these kind of questions many times, that how it can be put to use, that we can convert this 147 into equivalent to IT export of $300 billion, which is not very difficult. But the issues of a mindset of converting from subsistent to surplus, to commerce, and from deficit to surplus. Your question is, one man's food is another man's poison. So the farmers may benefit of the 100 rupees to dollar, but it will kill number of things. It will, like fuel will become extremely expensive. Today, despite all the Make in India and Atmanirbhar, there is a significant bill that we pay for many imports, and that will go up by 50%. So it will contribute to a significant inflation, because the country which is net trade deficit, current account deficit, it will certainly face issues on the inflation and thereby interest rate, and it can kind of derail the whole economic growth.
Good afternoon, I'm Bharat Chaturvedi and I run a social enterprise. Maybe know your views on Mega Food Park scheme and how do we save ourselves from failures like that?
See, Mega Food Parks in intent was a very great scheme, because the whole idea was, so it all started with the value addition in agriculture processing, because everywhere it was coming out that we don't have any center of excellence for processing, and there is a logistics disadvantage when these goods have to travel long distances to get converted into value added. So the Mega Food Parks were very good intent, but to me it appears that some of the Mega Food Parks are doing well. It's not that all Mega Food Parks are, but some Mega Food Parks with the combination of the components, that whether it is dairy plus frozen plus milling or maybe aqua. So it was a function. The failure was a function of the combination that was used in a particular Mega Food Park. And some people used it as a creative real estate kind of a proxy, but some people who actually went into with the right intent, and the best example, I think Mr. Shiv Kumar was here. the mega food parks that ITC is making close to urban agglomerates, those are going to be center of excellence, and they provide support to both agriculture production system as well as the rural consumption, the consumption ecosystem without adding much logistics cost. So it's a great idea. Entrepreneurs did make a mess by choosing the wrong combination and choosing the wrong commodities to process in those areas. I've seen success examples, at least 10 to 12. Not all. I've seen failures also. So funnily enough, this government tried for a policy reform in the 3 farm bills, and one of the bills was actually trying to address of the aggregation of land. Because we talk about KVKs and we talk about the model production systems. Unless and until each mega cluster has a center of excellence run by some corporate who is putting investment, because it's a capital intensive. The scale agriculture is not without capital. If the moment you do scale agriculture, it will involve capital deployment, and for that you have to have an enablement in every, let's say, 5,000 hectares of piece of land. You need to have a 500 acres or a 300 acres of a aggregated land where somebody has put the capital, somebody has created a center of excellence, demonstrate, bring in farmers, make them seed, let them go back, one seed, one village, all kind of things. And obviously it's not going to be a easy thing, but it has to be thought through, because what my worry is that climate resilient seeds, I don't see that India has got a battery of climate resilient seeds. My worry is that the climate change impact would be precipitous. It's not gradual. All of a sudden we'll know that from 350 million ton we drop to 300 million ton. And that day it will panic, because the world doesn't have 50 million ton to feed us. This year, despite being talked about a big crop of 111 million ton, 112 million ton, even today the government is struggling to reach the last year number of their wheat procurement. And people are already started talking about possible import. So what I'm saying that if the climate change actually hit, nobody's ready.
So landless labor, I think so
So landless farmer, you have to protect both the owner who is willing to give a digital lease to him, which is protected by law in his favor, because those guys are worried that the landless guy will take the land away if he does it the tilling for 3 years. So the natural resource surrounding is a very interesting intellectual debate, and I engaged with it in 1995 when the UNDP was doing the sustainable earth modeling. It's a very interesting concept, but the point is that the countries which are resource starved, and whereas there is always the challenge that where to allocate. I think that's a bit of a luxury to talk about natural resources. But what I agree with you that there has to be a sustainability of. We have got a 267 million hectare of land mass. Of which 141 is that, and still, the government's own record, there are 56 or 57 million hectares of what you call wasteland, which can be put to use. So India is not short of a 360-degree arable piece of land. Somewhere or the other, it's always the agriculture is possible. What is an issue is, you are getting 90 centimeters of rainfall on such a huge land mass. What are we doing with that water resource? We are only talking about I think it's around $1 billion per hectare is that per square kilometer, that kind of an investment for irrigation, some number. So the whole idea is that, available natural resources, not only land, but the rainwater also availability, and how to use it and use it. I'll just give you an example. Australia doesn't have any water. Still, it is one of the large agriculture commodities exporter. They measure their productivity not in tons per hectare, but they measure the productivity in tons per decaliter of water. So India can also do the same. With that limited rainfall, and they get only like 2 or 3 months of in the whole year. They don't have like 4 months kind of a monsoon. They get only 30 or 40 days of rainfall, limited rainfall. Yet they have taken the productivity to the highest level in the world for whatever they are growing. That's it. Thank you.